Elon Musk sat in his office, the pale yellow light casting long shadows across his desk, a rare moment of silence amid his hectic days of ambitious projects. But today, his mind was no longer occupied with numbers or spacecraft blueprints. Another idea crept quietly into his thoughts. A seemingly simple yet strangely haunting question. If no one recognized me, how would they treat me? The idea arose during a casual conversation with a colleague. People always talk about kindness, about compassion, but do they really live up to their words? Does the respect he has received all this time come from who he is, or just from the name he bears? The question grew, becoming an irresistible challenge. And so a plan was born. No longer the billionaire who runs the world's leading corporations, Elon decided to transform into a homeless person, someone that society often passes by without a glance. One gloomy afternoon, he stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. His clothes were wrinkled, his shoes were worn, his hair was messy under his wig. An unfamiliar face looked back at him. For the first time in years, Elon Musk felt invisible. And then, with a deep breath, he walked out the door. The experiment had officially begun. No one recognized him on the street. Elon Musk, the name that once shook the technology world, once admired by millions, was now just a man who looked austere, walking silently among the emotionless crowd. His face now no longer had any trace of the rich and powerful man, only a disheveled appearance, eyes hidden behind smudged makeup, worn-out shoes making small rustling sounds on the cold pavement. Seattle was not too crowded today, but enough for him to clearly feel the indifference of the world around him. Eyes glanced over and then immediately turned away, as if not wanting to touch his existence. A man in a suit passed by, dodging to the side as if to avoid being touched by something unclean. A group of young people laughed in the distance, completely unaware that the person walking slowly in front of them was one of the greatest minds of our time. Elon did not feel offended, but he felt one thing clearly: invisibility was real. The cab stopped in front of the Lexington, one of the most upscale restaurants in the area. The yellow lights from inside reflected off the polished glass doors, where he could see well-dressed patrons chatting over expensive glasses of wine. A world completely different from his own image. He hesitated for a second, then he stepped forward. The large doors opened, and a warm breeze wafted through the cold air outside, carrying with it the scent of fine food, the warm scent of oak, and appraising glances. The murmur of conversation slowed as Elon entered. Eyes swept past him, then away, but this time not with indifference, but with annoyance. A young woman stood in front of the reception desk, neatly dressed, her hair tied back in a bun according to the restaurant's regulations. She looked at him, her professional smile faltering for a split second before she regained her polite demeanor. "How can I help you?" Her voice was polite, but there was a hint of hesitation, a hint of tension. "I'd like a table, just one." His answer was simple, without any hint of confusion. The receptionist glanced briefly at the manager behind the bar. A meaningful look. Then she turned back, her lips pursed slightly before speaking to him, still polite, but this time with a politeness that was dismissive. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're fully booked tonight." Elon was silent. He could see the rows of empty tables before him. No one wanted to serve someone like him. Not because there wasn't room, but because they had decided he didn't belong here. His experiment had just begun, and he had his first answer. Elon didn't leave right away. He just stood there, silent, letting the awkwardness linger. Elon didn't leave right away. He just stood there, silent, letting the awkwardness linger. The receptionist kept her polite smile, but her hand tightened on the edge of the counter. The manager in the distance frowned, glancing at him as if he wanted him to leave immediately. Around them, a few diners began to whisper, some frowning in annoyance, some looking indifferent, continuing their conversation as if nothing had happened. But in the corner of the restaurant, a young waitress had noticed him since she entered. Her name was Emily. She had only worked at the Lexington for a few months, still retaining the enthusiasm of a young person not yet worn down by this luxurious environment. Emily looked closely at Elon, not with disdain or fear like the others, but with curiosity. He didn't look like an ordinary homeless person. His gait was straight, his eyes calm, but there was a deep observation. Before the manager could order the customer to leave, Emily stepped forward. "I can serve you." The whole restaurant seemed to freeze for a second. The receptionist was surprised, the manager frowned in annoyance, and a few nearby customers started to look back. But Emily did not back down. "I can arrange a table near the kitchen. Please follow me." Elon said nothing, only smiled slightly. Finally, someone was willing to look at him with different eyes. Elon followed Emily to a small table near the kitchen door. the least popular spot in the restaurant. When he sat down, the surrounding eyes still had not stopped scrutinizing. A middle-aged couple sitting at a nearby table shook their heads, whispering to each other. How strange. A place like this would let such a person in. Another waiter, Michael, walked up to Emily as she was handing Elon the menu. His voice was low but loud enough for Elon to hear. What are you doing? Don't waste your time. People like that come here just to cause trouble. Emily didn't respond. She turned to Elon, giving him a friendly smile. What would you like to order? Elon looked at the menu, but he didn't really need to read it. He knew what he wanted, a simple, unpretentious dish. I'll have soup and bread. Emily frowned slightly. Is that all? That's all, she nodded, then walked into the kitchen, leaving her co-workers' suspicious gazes behind. Elon slowly surveyed the room as he waited for his food. He saw the manager glance at him from time to time, as if considering whether to order him out. He saw a bartender snicker as he said something to a nearby waiter, perhaps a joke about him. He saw some customers looking at him with displeasure, as if his presence spoiled the elegant atmosphere of the restaurant. But amidst all that, he also saw Emily. She continued to work as usual, unfazed, without seeming shy when serving him. When the soup and bread were brought out, Emily carefully placed them in front of him, still with that sincere smile. Enjoy your meal. Elon looked at her for a moment, then replied, Thank you. You are a good person. Emily was a little embarrassed, but she just smiled slightly and walked away. The whispers continued to echo around. An older woman frowned, calling Emily back. Why are you wasting your time with him? This restaurant is not a place for such people. Emily pursed her lips but kept her voice calm. I believe everyone deserves respect, ma'am. The woman sneered, shook her head, and turned away. But Elon saw the determination in Emily's eyes. She wasn't doing this to impress anyone. She was doing it because she truly believed in it. The meal was over, but Elon's experiment wasn't over yet. He stood up and walked to the center of the restaurant, where the chandeliers reflected off the polished wooden floor. The air in the room seemed to freeze as all eyes turned to him. The manager immediately stepped forward, his voice cold. Excuse me, sir, but I must ask you to leave the restaurant. Elon raised his hand, signaling that he was leaving. But before he left, he had one thing to say. He raised his hand, slowly removing his wig. The layers of makeup were wiped away, revealing a familiar face. There were gasps. Some of the diners gasped, and the whispers suddenly fell silent. I am Elon Musk. The room was dead silent. Elon looked around, his eyes scanning the faces of those who had despised him, those who had laughed at him, those who had tried to drive him away. I came here tonight not as a billionaire, but as a nobody, and I've seen how people really treat someone they thought was nothing. No one dared to say anything. Elon turned to Emily, his eyes softening. There's only one person here who treats me like a human being. He took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Emily opened it awkwardly and almost gasped when she saw the check inside, $50,000. She read the handwritten words on the attached note with trembling hands. She trembled as she read the handwritten words on the attached note. Emily, thank you for your kindness. Use this money to pursue your dreams, whether it's culinary school or opening your own restaurant. The world needs more people like you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. And the others? They bowed their heads, not daring to meet his eyes. Elon turned and headed for the door. But before he left one last sentence. How you treat those you consider inferior to you is how the world truly sees you. The door closed behind him, but the lesson he left behind remained. Elon Musk left the Lexington, but his legacy inside the restaurant was not over. The room, which had been bustling with laughter and the clinking of wine glasses, was now dead silent. No one was continuing their meal as naturally as before. The diners who had mocked him, the staff who had shown contempt for him, all sat still, lost in their own thoughts. Emily stood there, the $50,000 check shaking in her hand, Elon Musk's words still echoing in her mind. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Just a few minutes ago, she had been just a regular waitress, but now she held in her hands an opportunity that could change her life. The manager, who had wanted to kick Elon out of the restaurant, stood still. Confusion was evident on his face. Another staff member, who had sneered when Elon entered, bowed his head to avoid Emily's eyes. She didn't need them to say it. She knew they were all feeling regret. An older diner who had been blunt in criticizing Emily's kindness earlier looked down at his glass, slowly shook his head, and sighed. We were too quick to judge. No one responded, but everyone knew that tonight they had learned a lesson they would probably never forget. Overnight, the story of Elon Musk and the Lexington was all over social media. A diner who was at the restaurant that day filmed the entire event and posted it on Twitter with the caption, "Elon Musk came to our restaurant as a homeless person, and the reaction was embarrassing. But the best part? A server stepped up for kindness, and she was rewarded." The post went viral. In just a few hours, it attracted millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments. A test of humanity, and most people fail. We need more people like Emily in this world. Thank you, Elon Musk, for an unforgettable lesson. The press did not miss the opportunity. Major newspapers such as the New York Times, Forbes, The Guardian all reported on the story. TV channels also reported on the event, making it a hot topic for many days after. Meanwhile, the Lexington suddenly became the center of controversy. Many people criticized the behavior of employees and customers at the restaurant, calling for changes. Some even suggested a boycott. Under too much pressure, the restaurant's management was forced to hold an emergency meeting with employees. "We can't let this ruin the Lexington's reputation. From now on, every employee must be retrained in how to serve customers, regardless of what they look like." But for many, it was a belated response. While the story continued to make waves online, Emily chose to stay silent. She refused many interviews, not wanting to turn her kindness into a show. But there was one thing she couldn't refuse: her dream. With the money Elon Musk gave her, Emily decided to enroll in a prestigious culinary school that she had only dared to dream of before. On the day she left the Lexington, many of her colleagues came to say goodbye. Some looked at her with admiration, others with shame for what they had done that fateful night. The manager came to see her one last time, his eyes less arrogant than before. "You did what none of us dared to do. I hope you succeed." Emily smiled, not saying much. She knew that kindness didn't need praise, it just needed to be done. A few months later, when Elon Musk happened to check his email, he saw a message from Emily. "Thank you for believing in kindness. I got into culinary school and will pursue my dreams. One day I hope to invite you to my restaurant, where anyone will be treated with respect, no matter who they are." Elon finished reading, smiling. A few months after the event at the Lexington, Elon Musk appeared in a television interview. When asked about his experiment, he just smiled slightly. "It's not a joke. I just want to know if people really treat each other with kindness when wealth or fame is not involved." The interviewer asked, "And did you find the answer?" Elon nodded. "I saw good things and bad things. But most of all, I saw that true kindness has no conditions. It just takes a person brave enough to show it." Elon Musk's story became a lesson in humanity about how people judge each other based on appearance. It made millions of people around the world rethink how they treat those around them. And somewhere, a young girl named Emily is working hard every day to make her dream come true. A restaurant where everyone, rich or poor, classy or ordinary, is welcomed with open arms.